And at some point, I realized that hunting was not something that I did. It was who I was.
That's an interesting take on it. I never thought of it that way, that it's not something you do, it's who you are.
Yeah.
I'm a hunter. I don't go hunting.
Yeah. And so it was in that environment, all the things that, appealed to me about being a man or a young man I found in hunting, I'm a Christian guy, but I'm not a scripture guy, really. I know the ones I need to know, but I'm a creation Christian, I don't have a lot of formal prayers, but God and I talk every day, just talk every day. And that's how he is in my life. And when I would be out in the wilderness, everywhere I looked, I saw God, And so that was like part of who I am.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Cryptic, cryptic.com. Check them out. Now, Cryptic is a cool company. Not only are they God-fearing patriots and they're veteran-owned, but also they make unbelievable gear. No matter if you're hunting in the deserts of Sonora all the way up to sheep hunting in the Great North, they have a layer or layers for you. Plus, they have a bunch of cool patterns. Everything from Obscura all the way to Highlander, everything that you would need no matter where you hunt typically or that next great adventure. So check them out, cryptic.com. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Silencer Central. Silencer Central, thank you for supporting us. If you would like to support Silencer Central, if you have any interest in a silencer, which I encourage because it is a game changer in the field, check out silencercentral.com. They will walk you through the paperwork online, as well as they can ship that silencer directly to your doorstep. So check them out and tell them Ike sent you.
So Fred, you led a really interesting life. I've known you for many, many years. I met you through my dad, Mike. I used to travel with him on doing lectures and helping him do the lectures right shortly before you retired. And for those that haven't heard that story, go back in my podcast list, and there's one with Fred, my dad, Mike, and I. It is very entertaining, a lot of good stories, and it's really a lot about it morphed into something different than I had anticipated, but it's a lot about the history of the Eastman brand. Today, I want to talk about Fred. You and I've spent a ton of time together on airplanes and sitting next to each other in vehicles, bouncing around, antelope hunting like we just did. For those that haven't seen that episode, go check it out on Eastmans Hunting TV or Eastmans Hunting Journal's YouTube. We went on an antelope hunt here. You killed a giant buck. He was actually a 3-horn buck. Which if you've read my dad's antelope book, you realize the antelope are prehistoric and they used to have 3 horns. Well, this one did, one about the size of your pinky. It was pretty cool. But so I've got to hear a lot of stories of Fred and who he was as a kid and growing up in California. And it was a completely different place than it is today. Where in California? Were you born in California?
Yeah, I was born in San Fernando, California. May 28th, 1947, or maybe 1847, but feels like it sometimes.
You and I are actually almost perfectly 20 years apart, 30 years apart, almost perfectly within 13 days of being 30 years apart. We've celebrated birthdays together on
we
adventures.
Have.
So is that Central Valley? Is it?
No, I was born in Newhall, California, and Newhall, it was a small community right at the base of the southern base of the Tehachapi Mountains. So for your viewers who have ever driven from Los Angeles to Sacramento or something, where you take Interstate 5 and you go over the Grapevine into Bakersfield, we lived on the south side of that. In those days, there was maybe 2,000 people who lived in the whole valley. And now there's about 500,000 people who live in the same valley.
My gosh. So growing up in Newhall, I know your parents were pretty influential there. What did they do?
Yeah, my family came to Newhall in 1938 and bought purchased the Newhall Signal and Saugus Enterprise for $4,000.
That's the newspaper.
Yeah, that's the newspaper, yeah. It was a weekly paper that came out on Thursday, and so the boys worked all night printing it Wednesday night, and it came out on Thursday. And so it was one of those situations where we weren't a wealthy family, but because of the newspaper, we were pretty prominent. Everyone knew who you were and what your business was. So
What was, the newspaper was prominent. You said your family wasn't wealthy, but you were prominent. Why is that?
yeah, I think in a small community where the only really general news that people get is out of a newspaper. It comes out every Thursday from the Truebloods. Then that's how people came to know you. And so that had a lot of pluses and a lot of minuses. It kept you from doing really bad things. And it isn't too different than some of the little towns in Wyoming. I mean, people knew each other, helped each other out, had its drama, all of those things. But it was a great place to grow up, Ike. We were an hour from the beach, hour from the snow in the wintertime,
Wow.
hour from the desert, hour from Hollywood where all the zanies were. But in those days, you could go to Hollywood and famous actors were still walking around or driving around. It's not like it is today. And so I know it sounds crazy to say California was a great place to grow up, but if you were in a semi-rural area like we were, it was a terrific place to grow up.
So you say terrific place to grow up. Why is that? I mean, what'd you guys do as kids in California? I mean, I can't imagine.
Yeah, mostly it was a rural area, so we did a lot of rural things. We like my brother and I, whenever we need a little money, well, we'd go across the creek and they'd grow alfalfa, and then in the backfields they'd grow melons, and so it wasn't like we were stealing it. We were just taking what we needed, and when you got enough money for ice cream, then you quit taking them. When we got older, we got a little more sophisticated. We waited till the laborers picked them and brought the carts by our house, and then they just throw them off the cart to us. So we really didn't even have to heist them. Some years later, I had retired from the Edison Company. I had a consulting company in the same community, and so pretty involved in politics and stuff like that. And the biggest company in town was called Newhall Land and Farming, and that company was formed out of a Spanish land grant. They didn't have a Spanish land grant, but was formed out of one. And so they farmed, and mostly they leased to other farmers. And so they were also a major developer. They developed Valencia, California, and a bunch of other communities. And so one time they had a community leaders forum that they sponsored. And because I have no sense of discipline, I sat next to the president of the company, and on his left was a CEO of the company. And then there was other people around the table. So the CEO started with his left, and he said, I'd like everyone to do self-introductions and tell us a little bit about yourself. Well, as you might suspect, the stories got more grand as it proceeded around the table. A guy to my right said, well, I was born in poverty. I won the Nobel Peace Prize. I was in the Olympics, and you may have seen me in Super Bowl IX. And so it was a crazy thing to listen to. But when it got around to me, and because of my background and family and that, most of the people there already knew who I was. So I said, actually, I've had a relationship with Newhall Land Farming all my life. My brother and I were in the retail produce business. And it was a great business because there was virtually no overhead. And so Newhall Land and Farming was our wholesaler. And maybe the bad news was we somehow neglected to tell them. So one time, one of their foremen, a wonderful guy named J.D. Gallion, came by the house, and knocked on the door, and my mom answered the door, and he says, "Mrs. Trueblood, we don't mind if the boys steal some melons every once in a while, but we can't have the boys competing in our marketplace with our melons." And so that was the end of our produce business. And so life was kind of like that. Some people had money there and others didn't. For example, 6 of us lived in a 2-bedroom home, maybe 900 square feet. So the boys,
Oh my gosh.
boys slept outside it, from about May to October. And so my dad didn't have we didn't have a television because my dad said only communists own televisions. And so apparently we weren't communists, so we didn't have one. We listened to these old stand-up wood Philco radios they made with the big dials and all that stuff. So our childhood was filled with wonderful things like Lone Ranger and Cisco Kid, Amos and Andy, Jack Benny, Sergeant Preston of the Yukon, all of that stuff. And
Annie.
Yeah, just all of those great programs, which fed and developed your imagination for things. The only people who had a television that we knew, well, no, that's not exactly true, but one of them was the Burrites. They were older people. They had money, and they had a house with a great big bay window in the front and a couch that backed up to that bay window, and then they would sit in the couch and watch television.
The TV was on the other side.
Right. Yeah.
So you could see what they were watching.
Yeah, from outside. So when something was really good on television, we'd go over and stand in their flowers, and watch television. The problem was, if you're watching something funny, and my brother and I, because we're only like 2 or 3 feet away from the back of their head, my brother and I start laughing at something, and these 2 old people will go, they look at each other like, "Are you making that noise?" And so, typical rural childhood. It was wonderful. It was great.
It sounds like you grew up in the story of the Sandlot, just playing ball and riding your bikes everywhere and eating ice cream from the ice cream man and which you had a competitor, didn't you?
Yeah, well, we didn't have enough kids for, to do a full baseball game, so we made the girls play, and if they didn't, then we just never talked to them. They had to sit in the back of the bus and all that. But and so some of the girls became, really great athletes, and when they got to high school, they were really noteworthy athletes because they had to play baseball and other stuff like that when we were kids. And I think the story you're referring to is there was old people that had a 51 Chevrolet with a box in the back that had ice cream in it, Frank and Stella. If they were alive today, they'd be 145 years old, and so when the area grew a little bit, the Good Humor Man came to be a competition. And so to make this story short, one day, Mr. DiBernardi, who was a sheriff that weighed about 320, intimidating guy, came to our house and said, "Mrs. Trueblood, I know that all the kids here are partial to Frank and Stella and have been for a long time, but they cannot throw rocks at the Good Humor Man until he leaves." So apparently Good Humor had filed some kind of complaint against this band of ruffians in Benelli. And so, it was kind of like that.
The girls could pitch.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So growing up there, unbelievable life. And then after high school, I'm sure there's a bazillion funny stories about high school, but after high school, what was your next step? Did you ever consider going and because your dad was second generation in the newspaper or third maybe, did you ever think about going back into the newspaper business?
Actually, no, because when we got old enough to work, my dad said, "No child of mine will ever be in the newspaper business," because he worked 70 hours a week. He'd take half a day off on Sunday. And, in a way, we kind of kind of didn't know him. He was a homebody guy, but he just worked. He just worked because, the people who are watching this podcast that have a family business know if you don't get the work, if somebody else doesn't get the work done, you have to do it. And so, I work for Safeway for a while, and I have several stories about that I certainly cannot share on television. But
statute of limitations isn't up on that one.
Yeah,
huh?
really. It had to do with the boys in the dairy case. I'll just say that. But then I worked for a guy named Don Guglielmino at New Hardware. This guy was probably the most successful businessman in our town in those days. And so he hired me, and one day he came up and he put his arm around me. He was a tough guy. There's a training room at Notre Dame that's named after him, Don Guglielmino, great man. He walked up and he put his arm around me and he said, "Fred, your job is to sell hardware, not greet the customers." He apparently thought I was visiting too much. And so Don only told you things once, and then you were down the road. But so that was a lesson for me. When I worked for somebody, it wasn't just to have fun and enjoy it. You actually had to produce something.
So I know you went to the military, but did you, because it was during the Vietnam era, did you get drafted?
Yeah, I got drafted in July of 1966. Greetings from the President of the United States.
Oof.
Oh, my God. I
Now
can
what?
still see that letter. Yeah, of course, in those days, they were drafting people out of all these little towns. And so from September to from February to about September of 1966, I can't make up the numbers, but they drafted a significant number of people out of my town all at the same time. And so everybody got out about the same time. And that turned out to be a tough town. Guys coming back, and just lots of not cool stuff going on. And so our little town became a pretty tough place. You had to kind of be respectful and have social, or have, the word escapes me, but you had to have an awareness about you. But
so what did you do in the military?
Well, there's a long story about that. I put in for Rotary Wing School in Fort Rucker, Alabama.
For what? Rotor wing.
Right. Yeah,
helicopter.
Yeah, helicopter. And took my test. I was waiting for a school date. And I was driving an executive officer for a combat support group around and doing whatever he wanted me to do, wait for school date. And so this guy just kind of took a liking to me. And one day he said, "Fred, I don't want you to go to this school." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, just think about it. Why would they let a 19-year-old kid learn to fly a helicopter and have to do two 13-month tours in Vietnam and re-up for 3 years?" And I thought to myself, well, geez, I didn't think about that. I just thought about the glory of it, I want to be an airborne ranger kind of guy, And he said, there's another thing they're forming here I can't tell you too much about. It's called Atomic Demolition Platoon. And they're bringing some guys in for Germany. I think you'd be really good for this. So I did what he told me, and he probably saved my life. And
that's funny because that's what my dad was supposed to go to atomic demolition, and he opened his mouth one of the last days of school and said, "Wait, I don't understand. There's no extraction plan."
There is no extraction.
And they were, "Mr. Eastman?" He said the instructor said, "Mr. Eastman, I need to speak to you in the hallway." And the next thing you knew, he was sitting in a fire support base in frickin' Vietnam.
Yeah, it's Mike and I could have ended up knowing each other in the service because it was a pretty small community. Each unit had 15 people, and that was it.
Yeah.
And you really didn't socialize with anybody else. You just had to be careful of what you said. When people ask us about what we did, I said, well, I work in the 231st Engineer Platoon ADM. And that was the truth. You could check on that. And then we told people ADM was for administration. And so we transported nuclear trainers, bombs that we were trained to set off. Mostly we're trained to blow them up if we got caught. That's what you spend most of your time doing. But on a train where people could walk by it. And so people on this train, we had our M14s, loaded. And people walk by and stop. They go, "What's in the box?" I said, "Nuclear weapon." They'd all laugh and just walk off. So the truth,
hiding in plain sight.
Right, the truth was actually the best defense for that. But
so were you in Vietnam doing this?
No, they didn't. Well, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but they didn't have them in Vietnam. But they were in Germany and South Korea, Turkey, and
they're worried about Russia,
right? And so they would take us and people would disappear from time to time, but they would take you to foreign places where there's a defined border, where if you had to blow or some strategic targets that you needed to eliminate. This is not like damaging a dam. This is like making a gigantic hole in the ground. It wasn't anti-personnel, but it was like conventional demolition, except for just made a bigger bang. And so they'd send guys to these engineer battalions to train them how to support us, because we couldn't get anywhere or do anything without somebody carrying us there, basically.
Right.
But it was, it was an eye-opening experience. I was a much more suspicious person in 1968 when I got out than I was when I went in, because you just had to be kind of careful. And
Oof, that's crazy. So you got out. Well, you did that. It was 2 years.
Yeah,
2 years. I bet that was a lonely.
About 20 months actually. Yeah.
I bet that was a lonely 20 months because you guys really didn't get to socialize with anybody in case.
Well, you had basic and you had this
in
in-between stuff until they sorted out, what you were going to do. And it was, unless you like worked for the telephone company or something like that, they would take you and put you in an Army telephone unit somewhere. You had specialized skills, you could kind of, if you were drafted, you could have some influence on the outcome. Me, I was just lucky.
Yeah.
Lucky, just had angels watching out for me.
So you got out of the military, went back to Newhall. Obviously, you kind of talked about that. And then what? I mean, what do you do and wander around and try and figure out what's next, right?
Yeah, well, the first real problem you had to overcome is all the great girls that got married in the last 23 months,
as a 21-year-old kid.
What you got there? Yeah, I being a newspaper family, a real social person, when I went in the service, when I came out, because of being separated from all of that, it was like, I kind of felt like it'd be like 6 months after I went in, things would be kind of like that. But when I got out, things had really changed a lot. And
you said this one time when you went into the military, the society was one way, and in a short amount of time, just 2 years, you came out and it was completely different. The society had changed. It was right during a lot of social changes. And you missed the change, so it was probably shocking.
Yeah, it was kind of, because you looked around like, where do I fit in? A lot of racial issues, and I grew up in a place where I never knew a black person until I got into 7th grade. The Reverend Amos Hadnot, one of the coolest people. My brother John, I love that guy, man. He was a special person, and until I got in the 7th grade, didn't know. So I didn't get it. Why are you doing all this stuff? And so it takes a while to kind of adjust to that. And the women's movement had started, so women didn't ask to be asked to go out on a date. They ask you, or as the movement got stronger, they told you, yeah, we're going out on Friday. Yeah, okay. But it was a time of adjustment. Yeah.
And your career, and let's get into that. How did you get to working for Edison? Was it just looking for work and became a laborer?
Yeah, I did a couple things. After I got out of service, I worked on a flying D-Bar-S, which is an Appaloosa ranch that this guy had.
Appaloosa horses?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
He had a thoroughbred stud whose genetics were such that paired up with a quality Appaloosa mare produced the most beautiful big Appaloosa horses you ever saw. And he made $1 jillion off that stud. And so my job was to facilitate that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is another story I can't tell too much. Yeah.
Let's just put it this way, was to collect the special sauce.
No, actually, my job, I'll do this delicately. So the process took several days. There were vets come out and everybody's checked and stuff like that. And
because this was an artificial
serious business.
This wasn't an artificial insemination.
It
was all done natural.
No, yeah. And so they'd put the mare in next to a Shetland stud that we had there in a corral next to it. And when she started backing up the fence and stuff like that, we knew. So we'd bring her out and put her in a deal that looked like what you put grocery carts in, at the store. Because this big thoroughbred would break them down, And we'd bring in there and hook her up to a little ring that we had on the thing. And then my job was to go get this stud and bring him around. And you had to do it just right. Because once you got in there, he was in charge, he'd lift me off the ground. And so you had to get him behind her and kind of aimed in the right direction. And then when he got close to you got the heck out the way. But one time this guy, big Texan guy, man, Cadillac, big belly, big head of belt buckles bigger than my hat, and talking real loud. And he had these two young women with him, about 25 or 26 or something like that. Beautiful, I don't know what their job was, but they were dressed to the nines. And we had a little scaffolding around the pen, which was completely closed, so people could watch if they wanted to. And so, boy, out of the corner of my eye, I kept looking up, boy, man, that's really, those two women are really pretty nice looking, And so when the business got done, my job was to clean
make sure the stud was ready for the next
the next
go.
Yeah, you used an antiseptic and a little rag, and you had to catch him at the top, and a little bit of water on that would make him draw that right back in his body. And so that's how you clean him, like that. And if you didn't get it right, the boss would make you, make the horse active again. And so I did that, and I had a little bucket, and I was down on my knees, and it went okay. And one of the women said, what's that man doing? What's his job? And my boss says, his job is to clean the horses. And I thought, oh my God, I looked at the ground like, oh my God, this is what my life has come to, man. My job is cleaning the horses, And so that didn't last too long. I thought I got to get a job that I could, live on and that. So I worked for the telephone company a year and a half, and then I went to work for Edison because they were working a lot of overtime and they paid better. And I started at $3.59 an hour. And Ike, I never had so much money in my whole life as when I made $3.59 an hour.
And Edison was the power company.
Southern California Edison, thank you.
They it was distribution, not well, it was inline, right? It went from
we had generation and of course transmission and distribution. And I worked in the distribution. I started out as a laborer.
wow.
And so labor was the word that was on paper, but they just called you a grunt. and I can't tell you what else, but grunt actually was a hyphenated word, So it was pretty rough in those days. It's just kind of how things were until, maybe their social changes came along that didn't allow people to call you names like that. But
so how did you work it? Because let's fast forward and then talk about how you got there. But because this is a story of, putting your mind to it and recognizing opportunity and taking advantage of opportunity and making your own opportunity, because you retired as an executive there, right?
Yeah.
So you were 100% started at the bottom and retired at the top, and retired early, retired in your 50s.
Yeah.
And that was about the time that you got involved with Eastmans, in the sense of, I think you were just bored. People always ask, what does Fred do there? I said, we don't really know. He just, he shows up from time to time. We go hunting and we laugh a lot. And people are like, is he an owner? No. Well, does he work there? Well, not really. So, but that was about the time that you got started to get involved with helping Dad with his lectures and traveling around to shows for us and all that stuff. But how did you go from a laborer to an executive in the matter of 30 years or 20 some years?
I wasn't at the top of the company, but I was in a place where, I'm a kind of person that I don't need to be in charge, but I need to have influence on the outcome. And if you don't let me have influence in the outcome, I will have it anyway. And so I had some great jobs in the company and kind of wiggled my way up and worked for vice presidents, stuff like that. And but the biggest thing, Ike, was I looked around. All these linemen are hobbling around in their 50s, and it just wasn't a good company to get old in. It was hard work, and climbing poles looks pretty cool, but it's tough on you. And so the company offered this tuition assistance to college, and you had to compete for it. So I had a AA degree, from a community college. And so I put in for this, and I interviewed, and I thought I did pretty good. And they gave it to another guy that I knew who was a knucklehead. I shouldn't say that. He's probably watching your program. And, he was a knucklehead. And so that really made me angry, And so I went back and I said, I'd like to know why you didn't select me. And because I'm going to come back and do this again, And the guy said, well, Fred, we just didn't think you were good enough to be a supervisor manager in our company.
Oh, you don't tell me no.
And so you know me well enough to know what happened next. And so I went to Pepperdine for 2 years, ran out of money in the second semester of my last year, And I went to Pepperdine, and I graduated magna cum laude at the top of my public management class. And when they gave me I know you shouldn't be motivated by negative things, but I didn't want to just tell them they were wrong. I wanted to put this right up into their chest cavity from the South Side. So I worked at the time for a guy named Kenny Ledbetter, a good guy. He was a district manager. And I tried to make an appointment to see him. We're in the same property. And of course, everybody, well, what do you want to see him? Well, he said, I have an open door. Anybody can come see me, make an appointment. Well, it took me 2 weeks pretty much in the same building, get an appointment with this guy. And his secretary, who I knew was the one that really put it together. I walk in the door, and he says, well, Mr. Trueblood, have a seat. What can we do for you? I said, well, no, sir, I know you're busy and I appreciate you seeing me today. I only need 2 minutes of your time. I'll stand. And I laid my diploma down on his desk. And so he looked at that like he was reading every single word, but he was trying to think of what he was going to say to me. So he says, well, I guess we're going to have to do something with you, huh? And I said, yes, sir, you are. And he says, okay, give me a couple of weeks to put something together, and I will. And that's how it started.
Oh, wow. One of the things that I know, you glanced over this, but you put yourself through Pepperdine, which is a private elite school, at night while you're working full time.
Yep.
And you were married and had kids, right?
Yeah, I didn't have kids yet, but my wife, God love her, was her mom and dad had a Los Angeles Times dealership, so they worked at nights. They had people through papers and stuff, and if somebody was sick, they had to do it. And so I'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, go to work at Edison, get off at 4:30, go to college, get home at 10 o'clock at night. She would be in bed because she had to get up at 1 o'clock and work until 3 o'clock at our family business. Sometimes we'd argue on using Post-it notes on the refrigerator, but somebody was always getting in bed or getting out of bed. And it was a tough time. It was
a little hard to have kids that way.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. So what did they start you with at Edison as after you graduated? I mean, you went from obviously got into supervising, got into management.
Well, Edison had a real aggressive marketing department that sold all electric homes and all that stuff. And then when California mandated energy conservation, all those salesmen, they made conservation reps out of, because they really knew application electricity, and so they just kind of retrained them. And so they had to put me someplace, and so they put me there and set me out on the desert and gave me a job and some goals. Here's your goals.
Wow.
Well, it took me about 2 weeks to figure that out. I was working 2 or 3 days a week and just sandbagging the rest of it and kind of being at the top of my group. And so once they see people start producing, then they start dragging you up.
That's awesome. So you retired, what year was it? 2001?
Yeah.
2001. And you got how did you and Mike, because you went to Africa with him, and was it him and our clients, our advertisers first, or was it him and Guy that you went with first?
Well, both actually.
That's right. It was the same time frame.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, your dad and I had known each other for a little while, and your dad and I are two different people. And I used to like to say, between us, we made like a complete human being, And so, and there's a little truth to that, I learned a lot of things from your dad, and your dad learned some things from me too. And so together we were a pretty good team, other than people look at us. So that's the two unlikeliest partners I'd ever look at. But, and then one thing led to another, when your dad bought the business back and all of that changed, with my background, I had the skills that the company needed. And so that's how I ended up playing a little larger role in things as it off and on, by need as it kind of went along. And then kind of one day we wake up, we're all sort of family.
Yeah. You guys had a lot of fun in Africa, both times that you went together.
When I retired, I love filming wildlife with no training, no attachment, no reason, no money, none of that. And so I end up with a lot of money when I left Edison. If the ratepayers knew how much money I walked away with, they'd really be upset with. And so I bought a Canon XL1 camera, the best wildlife camera you could buy at the time. It was $3,000 in 2001. And so, Mike knew that. And one time we saw each other at a show, and he says, I'm going to Tanzania. I need a second camera. You want to go? Sure. When do we leave? Let's go. And so that's how that started. And then we filmed these two clients from a really big company. And then your brother came in, and in the second 2 weeks, but we spent about 5 weeks in the bush in Tanzania. Changed my life. I realized that Americans live in a bubble. We have our own bubble that we live in, soccer on Saturday bubble that we live in. And the rest of the world lives a day at a time, They don't. That was one of the hard things to teach people in Africa about wildlife conservation, because they just live for today and a piece of tomorrow. You tell a guy, well, you need to implement these conservation programs so that your grandchildren will have wildlife. Foreign concept.
Yeah.
Had no idea about that. Just
why do I care what my grandkids are doing?
Right. Yeah.
I might not make tomorrow.
What grandkids? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, life was really cheap, and you learned over time by being in the bush that the beauty of life is like a nanosecond away from the end of life, no life. And it's pretty fragile. And so you start thinking about life differently, your family and your impact on those around you and other things like that. Changed me.
So do you think it's because of hunting that you recognize that? Or do you think it was situational with, you're changing big changes, and when you retire, that's a big change in life. Do you think it was just the right time at the right moment? You were changing your life and were able to recognize that?
Yeah, at the time life happens, I always think, God, what a coincidental lucky thing that is. And then as you get older and you start reflecting about it, there's more of the dots are more connected, like there's actually a plan or something.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't want to get too far into that, but even though I believe it, we're not doing this randomly. This is part of something that's kind of bigger than both of us, whatever it is. We don't know that yet, but and then hunting for me was the unlikely vehicle for it. I've been all over the world. I know people from all over the world. I have a minor place in the business. We have a hunting operation in Mexico for deer and sheep still.
Agua Dulce outfitting.
Agua Dulce outfitting.
You shoot big deer and big sheep.
Man, it's
and the safest, nicest operation.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say it's it's not the Texas huge lodge experience, but your hunting is unbelievable.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of our customers or our clients are repeat guys, they don't go every year, but some guys do. But, every 2 or 3 years they come back, and it's not just for, killing something. It's for the culture and the food and the camaraderie, the different kind of camaraderie, and the beauty of the desert. The desert is the Sonoran Desert is a beautiful place. And when you slow down and look at all the things that live there, and that it's, I live 20 miles from the border, and I'm not moving.
Yeah. Yeah.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Hornady. They make some of the best, most accurate, dependable ammo on the planet. No matter if you're coyote hunting or plinking steel or hunting big game out west or even going to Africa, they make a bullet or an ammo just for you. Some of the most accurate and dependable ammo on the planet. Also, check out my podcast with Steve Hornady and learn about ammo as well as their story and some funny anecdotes from Steve. Today's sponsor is Forever Barnwood. Guys, we have been using this in our renovation of our building here in Powell, Wyoming, and I am here to tell you it is amazing. They are a premier supplier of barnwood across the U.S. Their products come from fresh-cut Wisconsin white pine, which has been kiln-dried way below standard lumber and hand-processed into various products like barn doors, beams, flooring, and wall covering. This type of lumber product provides all of the advantage of reclaimed barnwood at a fraction of the cost, not to mention how easy it is to work with because it's straight lumber and it doesn't have all the waste. Their barnwood products are a renewable resource and come in a variety of widths and lengths, large sizes for countertops, beams, posts, stairs, and railing systems, as well as wall covering and everything else. Their prices are only a fraction of the cost elsewhere, and they can ship anywhere you need it. With their innovative barnwood products, you'll have the right piece at the right time for your special project. So check them out at yourforeverbarnwood.com. No matter what your project is, Forever has. With their innovative barnwood products, you'll have the right piece at the right time for your special project. So check them out at foreverbarnwood.com. And no matter what your project is, Forever Barnwood has you covered.
So kind of worked with Eastmans in the sense of you did some shows. You spent 3 hellacious years one day in Pennsylvania doing the largest hunting show on the planet, which is in Pennsylvania in February. It's 9 days long. It is, from an exhibitor standpoint, the absolute ass kicker of all shows. I mean, it is unbelievable. Plus it's a petri dish. Plus it's in the winter in Pennsylvania, so it travels hard. So you almost died once. What was that about?
I'm sorry, say again?
You almost died once in Pennsylvania, but because of that.
Yeah, basically you drive from, people will recognize Santa Barbara. It was a little ways away from where I live, but you drive from Santa Barbara to Pennsylvania in February.
That's a lot of weather.
So you leave Tumacarry, New Mexico, driving 45 miles an hour in four-wheel drive on the frozen interstate with these crazy semi guys going by you at 70 miles an hour, nose to butt, and so you had to answer the bell. It shows you get guys that you see guys partying and hooping it up, and they don't show up at the booth until noon. But our rule was when the show opened, you were ready to go. And so if you had weather, you just had to drive longer. So there would be 18-hour days in that driving, getting there and back. In the year you're talking about when I came back,
yeah,
I got sick. There from, you get sick there, you wonder what the heck it is.
Well, there's 250,000 people walk through that building in 9 days or some crazy thing. I mean, just we called it the petri dish, and you're, the weather's perfect for it because it's cold and dreary and, dark, and anyway.
So on the way back, I'd drive for 2 hours and pull into a rest stop and sleep for some short amount of time, and then drive another 2 hours or so. And, I quit, upchucking all that stuff because I didn't eat or do any of that, And I did that all the way until I got to Gallup, New Mexico. And then I was starting to hallucinate, I'd blink my eyes and I thought, God, I think I'd see something, but I didn't. I said, man, I got to pull in here. And so I pulled into a Days Inn in Gallup, New Mexico, and got in my room in the fetal position and shook for an hour before I went to sleep. And I woke up about 10 hours later and the whole bed was sopping wet, I thought the maid had come in there, wondering if we'd had I thought it was a water bed or something. And
had a water fight in the middle of the bed. Wow.
It was but things were different then. Your dad, one of the reasons your dad was successful is because he had rules that you're going to be with this company. This is your code of conduct.
Yeah.
And that's what Well, I think one of the things that elevated this company when others were diving in the Pacific like a Japanese zero, you know.
Yeah, and we still live by that. No drinking in the booth. You're careful of your night life. There's a ton of things: ethical hunting, ethical business.
Yeah.
All that stuff. I don't have anybody that works with me that works for us that has a wildlife violation. It just doesn't. It's not wanted here. And
Yeah.
you have to watch your P's and Q's not only before you work here, but during and that's just as important. So I ask everybody this, and I'm really interested because you're a profound guy. You always give huge pieces of wisdom, and you have ever since I've known you, and I've known you for 25 years. Well, I've known you longer than that, but we've been close for 25 years. I've known you since I was a kid. Fred's calling. He needs more posters or tickets or whatever. But why do you hunt? Why did you start hunting? Why did you continue hunting? And why did we go antelope hunting this week?
Yeah, it's really kind of a funny question. We hunted as kids, and you got 22s, and we hunted all the time, but there really wasn't hunting. We were just doing a kid thing when we had guns, And I'm not saying we were dangerous because we were pretty responsible. In those days, boys were raised by a tribe of men, not just your father. He was the most important one. But if somebody else's dad told you to do something, you better freaking hop to it.
Yeah, because he had permission to spank your little ass.
Right, that's right. And so we had the benefit of that. And even though my dad didn't hunt, my friends' dads did. And so that's really kind of what started me on it. And then when I got out of the service, I got kind of serious about it. And people would say, God, man, we're going to go do this or go do that. It'll be really fun. Why don't you come with us? Oh, no, man, we're hunting on Saturday. And at some point, I realized that hunting was not something that I did. It was who I was.
That's an interesting take on it. I never thought of it that way, that it's not something you do, it's who you are.
Yeah.
I'm a hunter. I don't go hunting.
Yeah. And so it was in that environment, all the things that, appealed to me about being a man or a young man I found in hunting, I'm a Christian guy, but I'm not a scripture guy, really. I know the ones I need to know, but I'm a creation Christian, I don't have a lot of formal prayers, but God and I talk every day, just talk every day. And that's how he is in my life. And when I would be out in the wilderness, everywhere I looked, I saw God, And so that was like part of who I am. And then, you're not this one day and then something else the next day. You kind of grow into that. And other experiences in your life either fit that or they don't, and you add them or shed them. And then I lived with a bunch of guys who were really good hunters and became really competitive, and I almost quit.
Really?
It's just not fun. And then my old partner, Trueblood Lewis, God love him. He took me with him one time. He was 20 years older than me and a fireman. And then I learned about real hunting.
He was 20 years older than you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He hunted with me into his 80s. And I would my boys would say, God, man, Durwood's getting too old. I said, you know what? He's the first guy that took me out of state hunting in 1969 and changed my whole life. Out of state hunting changed my whole life. Then you could out of state hunt like in your own state,
right?
And change my whole life. And then pretty soon I'm doing shows and I know people from all over the world, and it enriches my life. And you I get a minor place in the business, where people come to my booth every year just to shake hands and say hello, and they could be from anywhere. And so your life is relevant. It becomes more relevant, and you're relevant to more things. And I'm satisfied that hunting was the vehicle that brought a lot of relevancy to my life.
If you could give your 25-year-old self some advice, either advice or suggestions, what would that be?
Yeah, wow. Well, I know what one of them would be right away, but I would, if I had to do it over again, I'd be more serious about it. You and I have been in situations where we're in a hilarious place, and 10 seconds later, we're either doing or talking about something that is really serious. And so, people say, "What do you major in college?" I said, "I majored in having a good time."
Campus wildlife.
Yeah. It was. That's what I wanted to do. Be. I wanted people to remember me. And so in a kidding way, people say, at the end of your life, what would you like? And I said, well, I like them to have my funeral at Dodger Stadium. That's what I'd really like. But, that's making fun of, just wanting to be remembered.
So, so hunting is important to you, and it meaning that you are a hunter, and you've been all over the world. You've been to Kamchatka, you've been to New Zealand, you've been to Mongolia, you've been to Africa a number of times. You've been obviously hunted Mexico a lot. You've hunted Canada with us. You've hunted Alaska. I mean, you've done a lot of this stuff. What is one of those things that you go, man, had I known then what I know now? Would you have done it earlier in life?
Yeah, no, that's a painful question because but when you're raising a family and you want to go to Mongolia, that's about as selfish a thing as you can imagine. And so
I know I went to Mongolia I was in Mongolia 2 weeks before my youngest daughter was born.
Yeah. So the pull on your emotions about that. There's who you are needs to do this, but your obligations as a man is something else. And so you have to do that also.
Right.
And, but what I regret is I realized that I could have saved my money and went every 3 years starting in my 40s or 30s. I could put enough money away to do something like that and go every 3 years, and I didn't do it. And you blame your family for not being able to do it. Now it's a double regret, and I would say that's in the context of hunting and stuff, that if I could do it over again, that I would do it differently, like that. And it would have been okay with everybody.
God willing, you have the ability to be on a deathbed and you don't get struck by lightning or eaten by a grizzly bear in Kamchatka or some crazy thing, crash a helicopter. What are you going to be thinking about? What are the things that are important to you?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say exactly, but I know what some of them are already. I've made some pretty bad mistakes in my life, things that I'm not proud of, but I've already come to grips with those. You can't undo them. What's done is done, and you're either forgiven or you're not. And so not too much you can do about that. And so I don't think I'll be too regretful on my last day. And my vanity would be about my goal in life was to be an interesting person. And if I could have lived my life when people said, "Oh, Fred was a pretty interesting guy," then that would be satisfying to me. And there are moments and people that were key in my life, to include your family. You know I've influenced this here from time to time with some contributions that people value, and your family has given that back to me. I have 2 daughters, and now I have 2 sons, and so that's how I look at it. And so you guys will be on that list because of how much of my late adult life, your family and activities that are related to it have impacted me and what I've participated in. And so I'll say this: your viewers will think this is really funny, but not funny, but odd maybe. When I die, I'm going to leave my money to my grandchildren. We've paid for the girls' education, and their mother's family has, money for them. But I'm going to leave my money to my grandchildren because I want them to remember me. When I go, the youngest one will still be pretty young. And so unless I live to be 100, and then I won't know anyway. But, and so a person says, I could never love anything in my life more than my children. And that's not true. Wait till you have grandchildren. It's different, man. And it's a whole different thing.
My mom says this all the time. The only reason she had kids is to have grandkids.
Yeah.
Because of grandkids, you get all the good and none of the bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the joy of being with them at that age, and the joy they have being that old is just the greatest thing. And so that'll occupy a really, not to downplay my children, I'm not, but no. That'll be a big part of it. How cool is that? These little monkeys are related to me.
So, a couple takeaways. What are one thing that if your oldest grandchild was sitting right here and he was 22 years old or 32 years old, what is a couple things that you would say, make sure you do this, or make sure, or learn this, or, what are some of those wisdom pieces that you have in your bright 77 years?
I think it's, I've had people in my family and people who are close to me that I've helped in times where they were in difficulty, and managed to help extract them from that situation. And they say to me, I'm in debt to you for the rest of my life. I don't know how to pay you back. And I said, I know how you can pay me back. Be a good person. You can pick up the garbage and be a good person. You can be a CEO and be a good person. Be a good person first. Just be a good person. And the things that are meant to come to you will come to you.
That's aligning your priorities.
Yeah, it sounds simple. And I talk like I've known that all along, and I haven't. It is something you just come to realize. So money's important, and love is important, and job fulfillment's important, all that. But being a good person has more of an impact than all those things. And so you see military guys that give their life for another person, and these people. And they value that more than any other thing in their life. They'll talk about that guy right there, with the beard, saved my life twice.
Right.
And that's more important than any business or transaction or family or this or that. And so that's a hard example of being a good person, but opening the door for an old lady is being a good person. And I'm telling you, that stuff just plays forward, I know that. And so that's the first thing I tell them: be a good person. I know it sounds shallow, but
I think
all
life,
good things will follow that.
I think life can be simple if you allow it to be.
Yeah.
And the lessons and the successes in life can be very simple. We humans make it complicated because
That's
we
right.
try and make it complicated with excuses usually. Well, I wasn't a good person because whatever, because I was having a bad day, or I had too many beers, or I, didn't get that promotion. So I let it out on whatever, and it just be a good person and things will happen. That's great. That's awesome. Well, I have always appreciated our relationship and our time spent together. We just bounced around the desert looking for a huge antelope, and you killed a giant one this year. And I just appreciate the stories and the time that we get to spend together and the wisdom. And I have been that person that was struggling with whatever, and came to you and said, "What do I do with this?" As you know, I'm a Christian guy too, and I've often been spoken to from the Holy Spirit through you, because you say stuff, and I'm like, "Oh man, that's really deep." And 2 hours later, I go, "Hey, when you said that, what did you mean?" And you look at me like, "Did I say that?" I don't remember saying that.
Yeah, I call them pearls, and so I'm a pretty smart guy, but I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and so pearls are things that come out when people need them. And I don't know where they come from. It's a gift that's not of my own creation. People say, "God, that's pretty wise, Fred. You're a pretty smart guy." And I said, "No, I'm not." There are things that just happen when they're supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a gift,
Yeah.
You share the gift. It's really not even my gift, but
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate your time in the sense of not only the antelope hunt, but sitting down and sharing a little bit of your story. And I've heard way funnier stories from you, Fred. I know they're in there, but that may be for a later time. The one where you got run over by a truck. Well, that's not funny. That's just one of those "Are you kidding me?" Or the egging of the tennis court during prom. Stuff that I won't, you didn't go into, so I'm not going to, because there's might be a statutes of limitations
there was a
loophole.
There was a period in my life where there was no such thing as a bad idea.
That's a horrible idea. What time do we start?
Yeah, I've got a lot of them. Even you said, "Fred, you need to write a book someday and include your stories in some other fictional character," something like that. And, maybe that's my next project in life.
Yeah. I actually asked you before we got on here, tell a good hunting story. Do you have a good hunting story? Have you been thinking about that?
Yeah, well, it's I don't know what word to describe, but a lot of my hunting, especially international hunting, is more of an adventure.
Yeah.
Than it is about taking an animal. And really extraordinary things have happened that make for pretty extraordinary stories. I mean, that's, it's not a good thing to say if the story's about you, but I mean, the story in itself is pretty extraordinary. And your dad a long time ago gave me a leather-bound journal book.
Yeah.
I don't know if I haven't seen those for like 20 years. And so I started to write in it, and then I thought, no, I like this. And so that caused me to buy another journal book, and I wrote in other journals and kept his gift to me in a pristine condition. Still have it.
Yeah.
Gave it to me, I don't even know how long ago, 20 or 25 years ago.
So you when you go on these adventures, I've seen you do it. You journal at night. Say, "Oh, this is what happened today," or "This is the spectacular event that happened." And we've been on plenty of adventures together.
Yeah, even you and I have. Let me tell this story. People watch your podcast.
Shut up.
People watch your podcast and go, "God, man, Ike Eastman's a giant guy, man. Serious hunter, wonderful teacher, gives hunts away."
No one says
stuff.
that.
Let me tell you about this guy. So we're in Zimbabwe hunting buffalo. and I'm up on the buffalo. I'm the hunter. And so we're hunting buffalo in heavy underbrush. It's kind of like hunting grizzly bear in the oak brush.
Yeah.
Everything's up close and tense because you're always surrounded by buffalo. And I mean, when I say
but you can't see them.
Surrounded, it's 15, 20 yards away
Yeah.
all the time when you're in there with them. And so there's no time for fooling around that. Everybody has a job and a role. And this one time we're on this buffalo and had a really good buffalo in it, one really good buffalo. We saw him, glimpses of him, trying to stay on him. So we had a tracker out front, and he wouldn't speak. What was his name? You remember his name? Highly skilled guy. This guy was special. And so when we get up on a buffalo that no one saw, he'd turn around and just look at you. That meant, get ready. Here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go. And so then behind him was the PH, and then behind him was me, and then behind me was Ike with a camera. And so this one particular time, man, it was tense. And we're going real slow, and the PH turned around, looked at me, and he said, "You stay right next to me. I want you to be able to reach out and touch me all the time. Don't move away from me." So, man, I'm up behind him, and I got my gun like this. I'm shaking like a leaf. Ike's right behind me because we get ready to shoot. All this is going to happen really fast. And Ike needs to be on it, man. So he's pretty close behind me. And so we're going through this thicket, and you could hear the buffalo on either side of me. And, I could see the tension on the PH's face, man. This was serious, serious, serious business. And I hear this voice behind me, "Amigo." And man, my heart stopped, I thought I was going to fall down. Here we go. Tense, man, tense. And this voice says, "You're walking like you're wearing flip-flops." I went, oh. And my knees buckled. I almost went to the ground.
I forgot about that.
We stood there and laughed for like 5 minutes, chased all the buffalo off, and then the next day we came back and did it again. But that's Ike, man. Right at the most serious moment, he goes, "Amigo, you walk like you're wearing flip-flops."
You're dragging your feet. I was like, I don't think he knows he's doing that.
I was so tense I could hardly breathe.
That was a fun trip, man.
Yeah.
We almost got thrown in jail there. That was crazy. Had some really neat experiences with Victoria Falls and buffalo hunting, and my hippo was awesome. And you shot a really nice Impala, and that was fun. It was a good time.
Yeah,
celebrated your 70th birthday and my 40th birthday all at the same time.
Yeah, Ike and his crew make this really look easy on film, nice and smooth and easy. I'd been filming on and off with them for quite a while. Then on Ike's hippo, and shooting a hippo is not easy because they're in the water and you only have about 2 inches to shoot at.
Yeah, trying to hit a baseball at 170 yards with a 4.16.
Yeah, you could shoot like an inch over the top of that hippo and the bullet wouldn't hit the water for another 500 yards, But so it's really hard. It's just hard to do. And so we found a really good pod of, group of hippos, and it has 2 really big hippos in it. And so I get set up on the camera, man, and this one lifts his head out because he's really big. I'm on him. I'm sucked up on him. Ike's in the sticks, and he says, "Amigo, are you ready?" And I lift my head up off the camera and I looked at him and I go, "Oh, shoot, man, this gun's pointing at a different hippo that I'm filming." And so I look at the cutout, his gun's pointed, and I move the camera over a little bit, and there's another big hippo right there. Bang! And Ike shoots and takes this hippo, but it was when we looked at the tape, it was so smooth. It looked like we did the whole thing on purpose. But
Yeah, that was like the 14th hippo I'd shot at.
Oh,
My
God,
gosh, I
that
kept
was
missing
tough.
them. They were, you know how it is. You miss one or two, and then all of a sudden it becomes, the wheels just fall off, and the thread comes unraveled, and it was, it wasn't. It was a challenge, but man, we got it done. That was a fun hunt.
That was a hunt that we had two basic activities. One was hunting, and the other was destroying equipment or property of poachers.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. That's right. We found the poacher's boat, and the I guess he was the lead tracker, or maybe he was the game scout. Those guys went to hacking at that boat. It was a hand-carved boat, hand-carved log, and they went after that thing with machetes and turned it in. There wasn't a piece that was big enough to hold in one hand. I mean, it was unbelievable. They were so pissed.
Yeah, you'd be hunting and they'd do a timeout and just destroy those guys. And those guys would just take off. And of course, they're abandoned on an island someplace. Somebody has to come by and find them, or they just die on it.
Or they turn
and
into
if our
crocodiles.
guys caught them, they would just kill them. It was a pretty ugly deal. And so it was exciting the first time. After that was kind of a daily thing we do. What are we going to do? Have lunch or just go shoot those two guys over there? Well, we're going to have lunch. You guys are going to take care of that.
Yeah, that was a heck of a, and that was before Mundavi died, and it was a different place. It was definitely a different place.
Yeah, honestly, resource country was just beautiful. It just had everything in it.
Oh my gosh!
Destroyed by a guy who was mostly insane.
Yep, that's right. Well, once again, I appreciate you coming on, Fred, and sharing those things, and I can promise you on your antelope hunt, you did not walk like you had flip-flops on.
Yeah, good, man. Well,
the stock worked out.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of re-energized now after this one, and so we'll be back and do this again, my friend.
Yeah. Well, thank you.